Good morning. This lesson is for my Trig-Precalc class, but before I get started, I want to say I hope everyone is doing all right out there. I don't know what lesson this is. It's going to be Chapter 5, Lesson 7 or 8, but what I do know is what our goals are. So let's go ahead and go over our goals. Our first goal is going to be to create a double, or try it again. Our first goal is going to be to create double angle formulas from the angle sum formulas. Our second goal is going to be to create half angle formulas from creative substitutions from our first goal's results. So we need to accomplish the first goal in order to accomplish the second goal. All right, here we go. So we have formulas for sine of u plus v and cosine of u plus v. A double angle formula is when we have sine of theta plus theta or cosine of theta plus theta. We're adding the same thing together. So basically, we plug theta in for u and v, simplify our results for the case of the sine function, and do substitution in the case of the cosine function of theta plus theta. So let's go ahead and create the double angle formula for sine. Remember, our formula for sine of u plus v is sine of u times cosine of v plus sine of v times cosine of u. And we're going to use theta for the values of u and v. So we are going to get, where did I have my markers? I had a good marker. Oh, there you are. So we're going to get the following. We're going to get sine of theta plus theta, and that's equal to sine of theta times cosine of theta plus sine of theta times cosine of theta. Well, guess what? I have two of these. So what that means is we get 2 sine of theta times cosine of theta. And I can actually simplify this and we get sine, let me make that an I. We get 2 sine of theta is equal to 2 sine of theta times cosine of theta. So this is an example of the double angle formula for sine. All right. So I need to actually erase the board. I need a little bit more space for the cosine double angle because we're going to use some substitutions from our previous lesson. So let me go ahead and erase everything and I'll be back. I'm back. Let's finish the first goal here. So I'm going to try and walk through this as smoothly as I possibly can. If you're able to follow along with what I'm doing, you're in a really good spot. All right. So let's just hope I can articulate the concepts here. So from the what we're going to try and do is create the double angle formulas for cosine. It's plural here. So from the previous lesson, we needed some formulas. And I need the formula cosine squared of theta equals 1 minus sine squared theta, and sine squared theta equaling to 1 minus cosine squared theta. Just like finding the double angle formula for sine, we replace the u and v with theta. And in this case, we can do a couple of substitutions and get variations of the same result. Here's the angle sum formula for cosine. Cosine of u plus v is equal to cosine of u times cosine of v minus the sine of u times the sine of v. So what we're going to now do is substitute theta in for u and v, and we get the following. Cosine of theta plus theta is equal to cosine of theta times cosine of theta minus sine of theta times sine of theta. Well, cosine of theta times cosine of theta, that's cosine squared theta. And sine of theta times sine of theta, that's sine squared of theta. And so right here is one version of the cosine double angle formula. So we could say cosine of 2 theta is equal to cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. But remember, I want to do a couple substitutions because I have a cosine squared theta in that formula that I can replace with this. And I also have a sine squared theta in that formula that I can replace with this. And so we'll replace it and simplify. And these are going to be the two formulas that I'm going to need to create my half angle formulas in my second goal. So let me, hopefully I can walk you through it. So we're going to start with this. Okay, we're going to start with this. So we have cosine of 2 theta is equal to cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. Okay, but instead of cosine squared theta, I'm going to say 1 minus sine squared theta. And I'm going to subtract the sine squared theta from above, right? Or that guy. Well, I have 1 minus 2 sine squared thetas. Oh, I put 2. I always wonder why my hands are so dirty at the end of the day. So here is another version of our cosine double angle formula, 1 minus 2 sine squared. See, again, I needed to use a formula from previously. Let me find our third version here. So again, we're going to start off with cosine of 2 theta equaling to cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. And you know what? I hope I'm on the camera here. Ooh, I'm close. Ooh, just barely in there. Okay, I'm all right. Just stay on that side. Okay. I didn't want to have to record this for a third time. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace sine squared theta with 1 minus cosine squared theta. So I'm going to write it over here a little bit further. So we get cosine squared theta minus 1 minus cosine squared theta. We got to make sure we pass out that negative. We get minus 1 plus cosine squared theta. And we have our original cosine squared theta. And I now have 2 cosine squared thetas. Let me make some room here. All right. I don't want to get these confused. So I have 2 cosine squared thetas minus 1, and that is equal to my cosine of 2 theta. So this is the third version of my double angle formula. And I need these 2 formulas to accomplish my last goal. So again, if you're able to follow along just the little tricks I'm doing and substitutions, that's where I want you to be. In the upcoming lessons, we'll start using these formulas to solve equations, but I think it's worth seeing where they come from. So I'm going to go ahead and erase everything, hit pause, and I'll be back. I'm back for the last time, I promise. Let's go ahead and jump into our second goal. Remember, our second goal is going to be to create half angle formulas from creative substitutions from the first goal's results. Here are my results from the first goal. Now, this creative substitution that I'm going to talk about, it used to bother me. And I kind of thought it was like, I didn't like it because I didn't understand how simple and elegant it was. And we tend not to like things that we don't understand, but now that I understand it, I actually really appreciate how simple it is. So let me show you what we're going to do. We can write values in multiple ways. An example would be 5 is equal to 10 over 2. Basically, any number is half of another number. And if we're able to exploit that fact, any number is half of another number, we can actually create the half angle formulas for sine and cosine. It's really a neat little simple substitution. We move a couple things around and we have 2 new formulas. So instead of saying theta, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say u over 2. Remember, theta is an angle measure. And every number is half of a number. So because we're going to do this, this substitution, this is why it's called half angle. Okay? Now, I'll be honest, I tried to create the formulas by using the angle difference formulas. And I wasn't able to do it. I couldn't figure out a little trick to make it happen, and I had to create a new video because my second goal was based on doing that, and it just wasn't working. So I have to go through a way that I know for sure works. All right, so we have one of our first results from the first goal. Cosine of 2 theta is equal to 1 minus 2 sine squared of theta. Now I'm going to replace theta with u over 2. So what we're going to do now is we get by substitution. We're going to get cosine of 2 times u over 2 is equal to 1 minus 2 sine squared of u over 2. Now, what happens here is these cancel. These go away. And I'm left with cosine of u is equal to is equal to 1 minus 2 sine squared of u over 2. So, in order to get this formula, I need to isolate sine of u over 2. So that's the goal. Isolate sine of u over 2. All right. So maybe hit pause and try to do that from here and see if you can get that result. But if not, let's see if you can follow the steps. Remember, if you can follow what I'm doing, you're in a great spot. Okay, that's where I need you to be for this. So I can move the 1 over to both sides, or I can move 1 over to the other side by subtracting it. Let me do this. And I get minus 1 plus cosine of u is equal to minus 2 sine squared of u over 2. I now have to divide away the negative 2. Not that guy, that guy. So now I get minus 1 plus cosine of u divided by negative 2 is equal to sine squared of u over 2. Now, we don't like to have negatives in the denominator. I don't have a problem with it, but textbooks do. So what they're going to do is they're going to bring the negative up, and we are going to get the following result. We're going to get positive 1 minus cosine of u divided by 2 equals to sine squared of u over 2. The only thing that I have to do now is square root both sides, and I have isolated sine of u over 2. So let's square root both sides, and we get plus or minus 1 minus cosine of u divided by 2. That's equal to sine of u over 2. That is the half angle formula for sine. And hopefully you understand where it came from. And again, we had to use a creative little substitution. So let me put a line down here so we can separate both problems. And maybe take a second, hit pause, and try and do this one here on your own and see if we get the same results. Okay? Again, we do a substitution, so we get cosine of 2 times u over 2 equals to 2 cosine squared theta. Not theta, I'm putting u over 2 now. U over 2 minus 1. All right. Those cancel. I'm now left with cosine of u equals 2 cosine squared of u over 2 minus 1. Again, I need to isolate this trig function of cosine u over 2. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Plus 1, plus 1. And we get cosine of u plus 1 equals 2 cosine squared u over 2. Let's divide away the 2. They should seem very familiar now. cosine of u plus 1 divided by 2 is equal to cosine squared of u over 2. Let's square root both sides. And we get plus or minus the square root of cosine of u, cosine of u plus 1 divided by 2 is equal to cosine of u over 2. This is the half angle formula for cosine. All right? So again, if you're able to just follow along this where I need you to be, I have a homework assignment that I think would be very appropriate for this, and we'll discuss that in class, where you're going to verify that these formulas work with trig values we know. So again, if you're able to follow along, this is where you need to be. All right, I want you to see these mathematical moves because they're going to be part of what you see later on in calculus. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I'd like to dedicate this lesson to Dr. Mary Stauffer. And again, I hope everyone is doing all right out there. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.